Let's look at the issue of affordable housing. Now, I just talked about it varying from one city to the other, using Lagos as an example. But what's your take on the huge housing deficit that we currently have in Nigeria?
Well, the major challenge, which we're all aware of, is the fact that we have, certain limitations that it's not peculiar to Nigeria alone, just basically any developing country. One, rapid population growth. And just like you mentioned, Lagos, everybody's trooping to Lagos, to make ends meet, since there's no other state in the country that has the same level of opportunity and economic empowerment like Lagos. So every day, thousands of people troop into Lagos. How will government be able to plan for that? So definitely that leads to inadequate infrastructure. And of course, you'll be talking about land acquisition and ownership problem, because don't forget that traditionally land is owned by some families or the indigenes, and for you to acquire, I mean, there are issues, challenges. So, and again, our economy has not been doing too well. I mean, in the last 80 years. Also, in the last few years, also dollar keeps rising against our naira. So it's just and that also impacts on the cost of housing, cost of land, even to ordinary people to be able to get just a room to rent in Lagos now. It's almost out of the reach of the ordinary citizen because of the high cost of rent, high cost of housing and all that. And also, there is no system, like you mentioned earlier, that the Federal Mortgage Bank should have been the stopgap for particularly at least those who have regular income and all that to be able to access through the National Housing Fund. But all that, again, information is key, and that is why we need to, because at least a few years ago the government has made it possible for people to access, at least those who contributed into the National Housing Fund, NHF, at least to access 25% of their contribution to be able to buy land. But then that also has some challenge, because you can only access that if you are buying a property. They don't give you money to go and buy land. They give you money to buy a property. And that property must be in a location that already has a title document. Aha. And then when you look at the average Nigerian, what can they afford? Can they afford to buy a property in Lekki or, areas that are fully developed with title? So that poses another challenge. And then, those are some of all those, and then even when you get your the opportunity to get the inequality, corruption, bureaucracy. So a lot of things have bedeviled the average Nigerian in terms of housing. Yeah.
Right. Let's look at the issue of mortgage financing. Ideally, like we've said, this should take care of issues like this. But what are the critical challenges, confronting mortgage financing in Nigeria? What are the bottlenecks? And then how can it be simplified for Nigerians to have access to affordable housing?
Well, that is where government comes in. I mean, anything bureaucracy has to do with government. So if we're talking about, making that process easier, it still lies with government. And number one, that I will mention is information. Most people don't still believe that this is happening. Even those who are qualified, even those who have been, contributing into the NHS for 10 years, for 15 years, because I have a personal experience that my wife also, in fact, the bank had been, informing her for the past 3 years that take advantage of these, said, where is it possible? What about the process? It's just like you mentioned, bureaucracy, that who wants to go through that before you know it, they tell you you'll have to go to Abuja and you have to go and see somebody before they approve your stuff. The process can take 1 year and all that. So information, it's necessary, it is important for government to come out, to educate, to orientate, citizens. Number one, that if you have contributed to the NHF just for 6 months, after 6 months, you are eligible to apply. That sounds unbelievable, and it's like, how is that possible? How many people would it? But it is possible, and it is happening. So number one, and maybe that is where the media also comes up with this kind of educative, programs for more people to be able to call in and then hear and know that it is possible. At least I'm not a government official, so if I'm saying something is possible, it's something that we have just done. We just got a property, through the NHF, just a few months ago. Yes, the process took about 3-4 months, thereabout, but it's done. It's possible that people can begin to contribute into the National Housing Fund through the Federal Mortgage Bank. Cooperatives can begin to do that now. Corporate organizations, businesses, your own company, your media house can also do that, register, and then let staff begin to at least contribute into that fund. And that gives them at least that access to be able to do that. So, but on the part of the government now is to make the process more accessible and easier, that people don't need to begin to travel down, because when I was in their office, we're also trying to register our own staff, under the NHF stuff, which we started just about a few weeks ago. So people still have to come down to their office. So again, they need to make sure that this process can be done, remotely. You don't need to physically come to the office to submit form or to get the information you need. So these are just the areas that I believe the government can come in and let people know and make it easy. Thank you.
All right, you just talked about the need for information, but as critical as housing, and there is a National Housing Fund, why has the information not disseminated, not to every Nigerian? Why is it not out there? Why does it seem like something of privilege? You only come by it maybe by the nature of what you do, or if you are in an organization that is part of such scheme. And for those in the informal sector, how can they be incorporated into such?
It still boils down to information, still boils down to government orientation. Like I said, registered corporate organizations, registered cooperatives can always, they have the right and the structure to apply for this. So even the market women, the traders, because they are well organized, they have cooperatives that are well registered, they can approach, the Federal Mortgage Bank. Or they can come through realtors like us, to bring them into the system. So it is possible, but, information is lacking. So I will say your media house is doing a good thing in this regard. Let the news begin to go out. Let the awareness be created so that at least more and more people will know it is possible. It was not possible 3-4 years ago, but this thing has been signed into law, and that is why it started gradually, and it's going to increase because more and more people are getting aware of it, and then they are taking advantage of it.
All right, let's look at how much of pressure is coming from rural-urban migration, how much it has affected, provision of housing and then access to housing in Nigeria, this issue of rural-urban migration. How much of pressure or influence has it had on the issue of providing affordable housing in Nigeria?
Okay, how can a government truly plan for a city like Lagos where thousands troop in unchecked every day? How do you budget for that? How can you cope with that? So it's actually going to be a holistic, approach to it. For example, if the Dangote refinery were to be in Olokola, where originally it was meant to be sited, millions of people will troop to that area. The pressure is not going to come to Lagos. If other refineries in the country begin to work, the one in Kaduna, the one in Port Harcourt, the one in Warri, I mean, thousands and thousands of people will also move from Lagos and other states to those locations. So there must be a national, approach to this. But as long as it is only a state like Lagos that people can buy and sell and do business, and people can run down for employment, because in Lagos, like they say, except you are lazy, it's only the lazy that will go hungry in Lagos. Because even if it's for you to go and stand at the junction, or and just be diverting or traffic, people will start giving you money. Whether it's pure water you want to sell, you make money. Whether it's to sweep the street, you make money. So in Lagos, you find that people create jobs for themselves. But until other aspects of the country, other industries, other states start developing economic activities, that is the only way Lagos could be eased out. If not, the problem is going to continue and government cannot solve it. Private developers cannot also solve it because they don't have all the funding to be able to, continue. And don't forget also that even the land mass, the land space in Lagos is limited. Like everybody knows, I mean, we don't. There's virtually no more land in Lagos, and that is why land reclamation has been on the increase, because people still want to stay within, Lekki, within the urban centers, and so they keep just, reclaiming land just to create artificial land. And that is also affecting, the ocean encroachment and all that is also increasing. So we need a holistic approach to the matter.
some initiative towards providing affordable housing for Nigerians. You have schemes that allow people who want to own land to pay in installments. How's that working? And how does this affect the private investors? When you give people the chance to pay for land, and some pay in some states, in some locations, as low as 1,000 naira daily payment. For you who has acquired the land, how long will it take for you to recoup your investment? So how's it working out?
Well, when you look at it, some of these things sometimes can be very fraudulent. That's the truth of the matter. Just like you said, if you're asking somebody to pay 1,000 naira every day and all that, so how long is it going to take? So that you find that at the end of the day, even when the person has now paid, how many years is now going to take? We have instances that some real estate companies, even 3 years after people have completed, payment, subscribers cannot get land to be allocated to them. And I mean, it was a major issue, even last year, that some people have to go to a real estate company, and then to make noise became legal issues. I mean, how can you pay for land finally? But the truth of the matter is that when you ask 500 people to be paying for the same land, at the end of the day, they will sell and market and market and market, and then they will sell more than the land available. So when those people now finally, because some people will pay outright, some people will say they're going to pay 6 months. So, but where it is done, properly, and then it is being reasonable. I mean, people can have structured payment, instrumental payment for 12 months, for 18 months. Those are still manageable. You're saying, oh, within 2 years, at least you can complete your payment. And also, when that is done, the person who is paying outright is buying the land at a cheaper rate than you who want to spread your payment. So also the investor has already imputed the cost of appreciation on the land for that period of time. For example, if you're paying after 6 months, there could be a 10% markup. If you're paying after 12 months, there could be a 15% markup on the initial outright price, and just like that. So that is at least reasonable and genuine. You can't say that the person who is paying outright is going to pay the same amount, as the person who is going to complete payment in 18 months. No, except, that's just fraudulent. But it is helping because, for example, in our own company, I mean, so many people have taken advantage of that, and the, instrumental payment over, 12 months, 18 months, and then they've been allocated, because what we do is to say, we give you allocation after 50%. Once you've done 50% of payment, you are going to be given at least paper allocation, so that you know the exact plot and size of what you are paying for. So it's not until when that is completed, or that you're going to be given allocation. So if it is genuine, it is good, and it has helped.
All right, let's look at the issue of rent. For some Nigerians who can afford to pay out of their pocket or make arrangements to, get their own house or housing scheme, they opt for rent. And you have a situation in some states where they have to pay for 2 years and more. I remember in Lagos State, the issue of Lagos Tenancy Bill, which came up with the idea of paying rent for 1 year. But you discover that people's landlords or homeowners, they ask for 2 years, or property owners ask for more years. How does this affect, affordability when it comes to housing, and then the impact of that on housing development in Nigeria?
Well, if you listen to the president, Tinubu, recently in his speech, when he was talking about corruption, and then possibility of credit facility for citizens, and that is going to be one of the cardinal things that his administration is going to put in place. And how do you expect ordinary civil servants to be able to afford 5 million naira, outright to put down to get a property, or even to pay 1.2 million for a rent for a 2-bedroom apartment? How? These are some of the things that push people into all kinds of corrupt tendencies and activities, even in the corporate sector. Because if you can afford rent, like as of today in Lagos, you want to get just a room self in Lagos now in some locations. I mean, you'll be talking about minimum of 450,000 a room self. So how will a fresh graduate or just an office assistant be able to afford that? Where are they going to be able to get that? They cannot approach the bank for loan. They can't access anything. The landlord also is asking for, at least the only good thing is that for house rent, the issue of 2 years and all that at least have subsided, because the reality is clear that 80%, 90% of the citizens cannot afford even the 1 year you are talking about. I mean, in the last 2 years, landlords have realized, because of since the COVID era, it's not easy. So that is no longer, selling. If you are moving to an apartment for, yes, they call it, 1 year. But maybe if it's for for commercial shops and all that, they still request for like 2 years or 1.5 years because of the high demand for them. So that one is just a case of, demand and supply. But whether we like it or not, the cost of rent is pretty high, and that is hindering. And also, you will also realize, like human beings, we will always find alternatives. That is why people, the concept of shared apartment, shared room, is now very, very common in Lagos. Because when people cannot afford to even renew their rent, so they have to bring in, somebody in that are going to share the rent with. So in Lagos now, I know of apartments where 3-4 people are staying together, and then they are sharing, the bill, because it's not easy for somebody to raise the 1.2 million or 1 million. So 4 of them might come together. If it's a 3-bedroom apartment, okay, each of you take one room, even the sitting room, they can divide it and rent that one out, so that at least at the end of the day, everybody's just paying maybe like 400, and then to be able to survive. So that is what is happening. The reality is staring us in the face, and then people are adjusting to it.
Okay, let me ask you something related to what you just talked about. Apart from the demand for 2 years down payment, there's also something that have been introduced into rent. It started as a legal agreement and you paying agency fee. So now there used to be a percentage for this, but now you find that, for example, if you want to rent a room, maybe the rent is 300,000, for instance, and then they tell you that the legal agreement fee, agency fee, and I think there's caution fee as well, is almost more than 300,000 or equal to that. So you add it together, it becomes like 600,000. So where did these practices come from? What are how necessary are these fees, and how come it has become a practice where the fees you pay becomes more expensive or as expensive as the rent? The implications of this on people's ability to afford housing, not just in Lagos, but nationwide.
Well, that is a is an offshoot of capitalism. Is an offshoot of, demand and supply. People take advantage of others to enrich themselves. And we are in a capitalist, economy where the government cannot tell house owners, this is how much you must charge. Government cannot tell agents, you cannot, collect more than this percentage. I mean, if you're getting a property, maybe 1 million and above, you're going to be charged 10% agency, 10% legal, and then service charge and, caution fee. If you are getting an ordinary shop, there's a current case I'm aware of, a small shop that costs 10,000 naira per month, that is 120,000 per annum. The lady is being asked to pay 40,000 naira for agency and 40,000 naira for legal, and another 20,000 naira for caution. That's 100,000 naira for a shop of 120,000 per annum. So it is frustrating. And to be honest with you, I don't know how the government can come in. There was a time in Lagos that the government brought out and, that, landlords should not charge. It can never work because the houses are private ownership. So how are you going to tell the landlord this is the amount you should charge for rent? Or you should not charge more than, we should not collect rent more than. So we're exposed to all of these because we're in a capitalist system. And that is what makes life more difficult for people. Now, when you go to more civilized economies, who can even afford to pay 1 year rent in advance over there? How many? What is the percentage of the population in England that can pay 1 year rent in advance? It's not even possible. So the realities of every economy determine what is, going to be possible. Like I just mentioned earlier, 4 or 5 years down the line ago, I mean, landlord will insist 2 years, but when COVID started and, even their existing tenants cannot renew their rent, reality was done on them. So a landlord that you even give 6 months, he will collect sharp and say, okay, so when are you going to pay because of the reality of the times? The government can not really do anything in that regard. Agents will always, take advantage of that. So what do? We'll just manage that. There's nothing we can do. They will charge caution fee that more than 50% of the time, even when you are leaving, you cannot get back. The legal fee, there's no, so it's just like that. It's just like that. And because of the high demand, even when you say you cannot afford it, or please, they tell you to go. Somebody else will come and pay for it. So that is the dilemma.
Let's take a shift now from housing, financing to the reforms and government initiatives. Over the years, the federal government, including state government, has come up with several initiatives to improve, access to housing in Nigeria. But it hasn't been productive. It hasn't been, given any substance over the years. Talk to us. What has been the challenge when it comes to reforms, and providing good initiative when it comes to housing development in Nigeria?
Well, like I would say again, the government can only do much. Government has tried to um, do some, but I mean, it's like throwing if it's like providing housing for 500 people where you have 10 million people. How far can that go? That's you're not solving even 10% of the problem. As of today, Nigeria has over 17,000 or 17 million housing unit deficit. So where are we going to start from? So, but some of the initiative that I know the government can put in place. Number one, like this Federal Mortgage Bank, the National Housing Fund scheme, they can expand it so that more people can take advantage of it. Make it a national orientation program, part of the national orientation program. That is one thing that the government can do. They can laud it, they can really go extra mile and then pump money into the Federal Mortgage Bank or have a sort of arrangement with banks to be able to fund real estate developers. Because banks are not doing that. In fact, banks are competing with real estate developers because day to day go into the same business. So these are some of the initiatives that the government can take. Because one, if the funding is not there, then there's nothing any developer can do. If access to fund, if access to long-term loans are not there through the banks, what can they do? So for initiative, the government must also look at take a holistic approach to it, so that somebody even in the village, somebody in Kogi, somebody in Kano, somebody in Edo can also have access to housing fund or housing loan. We have done it before in this country. It was possible. So yes, our population is not also helping. And then the migration to city centers is also not putting a lot of pressure and demand, rapid demand, to those city centers. But that is a normal thing in a, cosmopolitan city and, the kind of system we run.
Okay, let's talk about the regulations towards urban planning. So how can regulations on urban planning guide housing development and even ensure efficient land use, also preventing informal settlement? We find in some new areas where developments are ongoing, it's scattered. We've talked about that before at another time when we talked about real estate. But what regulations will ensure efficient use of land and proper urban planning? How would that also affect the way housing is priced?
Well, the first thing is physical planning laws. Recently, if you are aware, you'll find that Lagos state government is going around, demolishing houses that are built on, drainage path, canal path. That is happening. It happened in Ikotai. It happened in VGC. It happened just all in the last 2 weeks. And the problem is that for developing areas, if people don't know what government or what the town planning structure is, then there's a problem. Because the people that sell land, the Omoniles and all that, don't know anything about town planning. They don't know anything about the government structure or government plan for that area. Government is not communicating to anybody, and people will just buy and then build. And it is after several years or whatever that government will now come and say, hey, where you build is on the path of canal. But at the end of the day, they will still blame the house owners or the developer that, well, you did not come to town planning to come and find out, what is the plan. But sometimes, for example, the development going on in Bejuleki now, there is no clear-cut, layout in that whole axis. Nothing. So people are just building and building and building until several years down the line, government is not going to wake up. Oh, we want to create road here. Oh, there's congestion here. Oh, there's flooding happening here. And so that is not good. And also we must have a national urban development policy. National urban development policy. There must be building codes that should be followed. There must be zoning regulations. There must be a good and realistic land use act. These are things that need to be put in place. Up till tomorrow, people still just develop an estate. I live in an estate where government has not done anything in the estate. No road. We had to construct the road. We are still doing other parts. We had to, do the drainage, put the street light, put the gate, put everything, run the electricity into the estate. I mean, so is it going to be after some years now, government will now come and say, okay, you need to now pay your land use, whatever, for an estate that they've not invested a dime. So there's a whole lot of issues. And then is that when they now want to come later and say, no, the drainage is meant to pass here because there's flooding in some areas. We now need to run a canal. So these are things that, those are the complications we have. And it's a big problem. Big problem.
Now let's look at the activities of land grabbers, popularly known as omonile. It's what you call a necessary evil. Now, what kind of reforms or initiatives are you expecting from the government to regulate their activities? Because it's been challenging to curb their activities over the years. But what kind of initiative are you expecting from the government to curb, the influence of people called land grabbers, popularly known as omonile?
Well, in Lagos State, there's a it is now illegal for land grabbers to operate the way they used to operate. Because that has been just tamed a bit. Than that is in Lagos, because Lagos at least is more, at least a bit more organized than other states. So the government is the only one that can, but because of our culture, now we have a property in, Magboro axis, and then that is under OPIC. Now, even when you go directly to OPIC to buy the land from the Ogun State Property Investment Company, you must still go back to the Baale of that area to pay money. Because even when government has given you your title document to move into the land and, take ownership, the Omoniles will tell you, you have to see us. You cannot. How will you just enter into our father's land, even though government has taken it over? I mean, so you must see them for you to peaceably develop your property. And these are people without face, because how many do you want to say you want to arrest, or you want to? So there's always the balance. Now, the only good thing that has evolved out of the system is the intervention of real estate companies that has now come in to deal with the Omoniles and then save the populace from directly interfering or interacting with Omonile. And that is the only structure now that has reduced, and put an end to the issue of, oh, I bought land and Omonile took it over. Oh, they asked me to come and pay again. The real estate company actually take that burden and that risk of, their clients. So that, for example, you're buying land from us, you have no issue, no concern with Omondile, because the real estate company, we've already purchased, we've already dealt with them, we've settled all the people we need to settle. They know us, we interact well with them, with their ballets, with everybody, with the families. They are okay, they are happy. So you go in, and then because you are building within an estate perimeter, when you want to build, no Omonile is going to go there to go and disturb you. No Omonile is going to enter into the estate property area. So you are protected. Even when there are issues where, for example, government now comes in and says, they want to use the land for something else, your investment is secure with the real estate company, because you are also not dealing directly with government. You are not at loss. So that is the savings and the comfort we have given to clients, that if you are investing, you're buying directly from us, go to sleep. Your investment is with us. You are not dealing with Omonile. You are not dealing with, so the responsibility is on us. So it's like we're giving the people at least that assurance and confidence that at least whatever you're buying through us is safe.
Okay, so what can be done to ensure adherence to building codes and standards to ensure safety in housing development? Often we hear of cases of building collapse in one part of the country or the other, and lots of housing developments going on nationwide. So how can, I don't know, building codes and their standard, but adherence to the standards, what can be done to enforce it?
Well, why are there no adherence? One is because somebody is settling somebody not to do the right thing. The codes are there, the standards are there. We are building some structures. I mean, there are about, for Lagos State, at least there are about 5 different agencies that will approach you where you are putting up a structure. 5. That's the minimum. The environment, the safety, they will come. So it's not like they don't know, or they are not aware of structures that come up, or that they don't approach them. But what happens? Settlement. And then they go. Nobody is doing the proper test or the proper checks or ensuring the proper safety is maintained. So all this goes back to the government, that the government should just enforce or ensure that proper building codes are followed by developers. There's no other way to it. There's no other, thing to do. It's not, the developer can decide to do anything, but it is the government that will say, no, this cannot work. I mean, we've had 2 terrible, instances in Ikoyi just in the last 2 years. High-rise buildings. How? Why? So that's all I can say about that.
Let's look at some of the challenges or problems associated with land use planning and development in Nigeria, which is where the basic problems usually come from. We have the Land Use Act, we ought to take care of this. Is there a need for reform, and then how effective has this been when it comes to land use planning and development in Nigeria?
I don't think it's about a new reform. It's just enforcement. It's just enforcement. There's no need for any new land use. What we have is more than enough. What are the basic things you need? It's not like there's any new thing in building technology or building structure. That is nothing. It's just enforcement.
To something you said earlier while we were talking about housing finance. You mentioned that the National Housing Fund, for those who were parts of it, who were making contributions, they can have access to about 25% of it, but they can have access to it when they want to buy a property with title. So is there a need to change some of the laws around this to make it easy for those who are part of the scheme and for others to come? Because you also talked about how housing or properties with title are very expensive, and that may be a discouragement or disincentive for people to be part of it.
Well, to be honest, yes, for an institution to invest in a land without title is too much risk. There's no business risk analysis that's going to, approve that. So, but the only thing is where government, because also getting land title is also where the bottleneck is. We have properties now that we've been waiting for 3 years just to get the title. Because for every title, for you to get just an excision, for a land to be officially, exceeded to the family, the governor must approve it. How many of the families, have access to be able to approach the governor or for their papers to actually get to the desk of the governor and then to get it approved? So it is in fact, we have to sponsor some families that have hectares of land. The cost of even doing survey, they cannot afford. The cost of processing, the title, they can't afford. So they need, sponsors like us to come in and then help them. And it still takes years. So that is another area of serious bottleneck. Serious bottleneck for families to get a decision or for an exceeded land to now be gazetted and then to now move to the point of, maybe issuing of CO. So it's a whole long journey. And that would delay, the number of lands that have title. So that is another, story for another day. So that is where we are, and that is why it is not easy for the ordinary people to have access or to be able to buy lands that are titled or that have title. So they rather just start, with a land without title and then hope that someday, somehow. So, I mean, so it's most of the estates that are developed in Ajah down to most of them, they don't have titles yet. And people have built for like 10 to 20 years. families are yet to be given excision to those lands. So even the property owners cannot process anything, because if the government does not release the land to the family, there is no way you can process anything to get your CO. So that is where we are.